They warned us about her, but we didn't listen. On the night the sky turned red, Ifeoma raised her hand and the wind obeyed. Lightning bent to her will. Trees trembled, I must tell you, and the air itself cried out. In that moment, she wasn't just a woman. She was a storm dressed in red. In the dream world, everything was silent until the witch appeared. Ifeoma draped in shadow. Udochi basked in light. They didn't speak. Their eyes did all the talking. Magic cracked in the air. And when their powers crashed, even the dream shook. Light against darkness, faith against fear. He called her name, but she didn't answer. Her body lay still. Her red dress looked like fire, but her skin felt cold. Chinonso dropped to his knees. The curse had reached her. He had never cried before, but tonight his tears spoke for a soul that was breaking. At first, Uche didn't care about the old woman's warning. She told him to be careful, told him Ifeoma's portions were not to be taken lightly. But he only laughed, shrugging her off like the suspicions of a backward village. He wanted to climb higher, to escape the endless struggle. Ifeoma promised wealth, influence, power, all within his reach for a small price. He couldn't see the danger. Not when the woman began flowing in, not when opportunities began appearing like magic, right when he needed them. And he certainly didn't care that Ifeoma only met with him under the cover of darkness. No one ever seeing her living, no one ever daring to question her. But she's pretty, beautiful, with well-shaped figure, hourglass shape. That was until the first night his dreams turned to nightmares. Let me tell you, it wasn't the kind of nightmare when you wake up sweating. No, it was a kind of nightmare where you were awake but couldn't move your legs, your head. You cannot move anything, no. Where you could hear the whispers of voices that weren't your own, but they felt too familiar. When his body refused to respond, even though his mind screamed to escape, he felt the shadows creeping closer, pulling him in. But when he tried to scream, no sound came. Have you ever been in that situation? The last thing he saw before he blanked out was her, standing in the doorway, watching him with eyes as cold. You belongs to me. You belongs to me. Now, Uche, Ifeoma whispered in a voice that slithered into his mind, and there's no way out. Ifeoma had always been a quiet figure in the village. No one quite knew her age. Her face was a mixture of youth and age, timeless in a way that made you uneasy to look at her. Her small shop nestles in the shadows of the old bamboo tree was where villagers came for remedies. But there was a warning in the air about her, a smell of something not quite right, even when people didn't speak of it. Nobody go talk now, you know that kind of thing. The villagers trusted her because they had no choice. Their lives had always been simple. Sickness, death, and love were often dealt with by the healer. Ifeoma was the one who brewed the potions to cure fevers, calm nerves, and ease pain. By the day, she was a healer, but by night, she was something else entirely. At first, no one ever noticed. No one suspected that beneath her kind, young exterior was a heart hardened by years of using magic, using people, taking what she wanted without ever giving anything real in return. And Ifeoma always got what she wanted. With Uche, she had found her next victim. Beware the night trader. Old Mama Nkechi had warned Uche when she saw him visiting Ifeoma's shop more often. Her eyes were wild, her hands shaking as if she had touched something deadly. You don't understand, young man. If you take from her, she takes from you. Uche had smiled, dismissing her warnings with a wave of his hand. Hmm. What do you know, Mama Nkechi? Now, wow, everything, all these you are so superstitious belief. You are just you are just an old and full of superstitions, he will say, as if life of poverty had taught him more than the village elders could ever know. But Mama Nkechi only sighed, muttering, "You will learn, boy, you will learn." Uche wasn't afraid. He wanted what Ifeoma promised, and when she had given him a small vial of portion, a portion she said would ensure his success, wealth, and prosperity, he didn't think twice. He drank it without questions, without hesitation, without even asking further question. Ah, when somebody is giving me money, yeah, they are blowing grammar, old woman. I beg. In that moment, he was convinced that his life was about to change for good. And change it he did. The following weeks we are noticing shots of miraculous. It was as if a door had opened, a floodgate, and everything he had dreamt of was now possible. His small business boomed. People lined up, eager to buy what he had to sell. His name spread throughout the village, then to nearby towns. He was no longer a poor man struggling for every penny. He had cars, houses, lands, things he had only ever imagined before. But with the success came with whispers in the night. His sleep became restless, haunted by strange dreams, by the feeling that something was wrong. Something was always there, in the corner of his mind, watching, waiting. At first, he shrugged it off. He was successful now. The world was his. He had earned it. But with every new piece of wealth, a part of him began to feel emptier. The nights were colder, the shadows darker, and no matter how much he gained, the unease inside him only grew. He couldn't explain it, but it was there, glaring at him. It wasn't until one evening, late at night, when Uche could no longer ignore the truth. He woke, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to scream. His beneath shallow and ragged. There was no sound, not even the wind. The darkness around him felt suffocating, as though it was closing in on him. And that's when he saw her. Standing in the doorway of his bedroom was Ifeoma. Her face was not the one he remembered, the kindly healer he had known. No, this was something else. Her skin seemed stretched, unnaturally pale, her eyes glowing with a cold fire that made Uche's stomach chomp. "Did you think you could have everything without paying the price?" she asked, her voice low, her smile twisted, her eyes burned into his soul. And in that moment, Uche understood everything. The wealth, the success, it wasn't his, it was hers. She had taken it from him. She had bound him to her. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Uche couldn't even fight it. Fear had him trapped. Fear that he had let into his own life. Fear that had been planted in the moment he accepted Ifeoma's gift. Now, he was nothing more than a puppet, his soul tied to hers, and the shadows around him seemed to laugh. The next morning, Uche was gone. I mean gone. The villagers thought he had left off to another town for business. Everybody was looking for Uche, but they could see it in his eyes the day he left. He was lost. His fate, sealed by his own ambition, was now in the hand of Ifeoma. No one would question it. They all feared her. Ifeoma had claimed another soul, just as she had done with so many others before him. Her power grew. The villagers of Okorodo would continue to live their lives unknowingly, enslaved by the very woman they trusted. Obinna had laughed off the first sign. His uncle's warning was nothing more than old superstition. He thought, don't trust Ifeoma. His uncle has said, I have told you now, oh, do not trust her. She is not what you think, oh. And he has said that again. She's not what she seems to be. But what did an old man know about ambition? What did a lifetime of farming teacher about making it big in the world? You are just a common farmer or even a teacher. Yes, when Ifeoma offered him a portion, promising wealth, he took it. That night, his business flourished. The next day, he felt as if he could do anything, accomplish anything. Think about it. Because anyone he wanted, but now, anything, anyone, any type of woman he wanted, he get them. And this is a man that likes women so much. There became a particular girl that he has been pursuing. Boom, the girl agreed. He became super excited. But now, standing in his own kitchen, watching his wife Adanna stare at the reflection of herself in the cracked mirror, he understood something was wrong. Adanna had changed. Her smile had faded. Her eyes distant. She had been his partner, his equal, but now she was an empty shell. And as she walks closer to her, his hands trembling, he realized the truth. Ifeoma's gift came with a price, and that price was more than just wealth. It was their humanity. Obinna had never asked for much. The farm had been small, but it provided. His life with Adanna was simple, yet he had been anything he wanted. They shared dreams of a larger life, of better opportunities, but nothing had ever come easy. His hands were collapsed from years of working the land. Then came Ifeoma. She had been an Egma in the village for years, seen but never truly known. By day, she was a healer, curing the sickness and the elderly with her concoctions and remedies. By night, she disappeared into the shadows. Whispering followed her wherever she went. Whispers of magic, of dark powers. But what could that possibly mean for someone like him? Someone just trying to make ends meet. When Ifeoma approached him, he hadn't hesitated. She had asked him what he wanted most, and he said, success, a chance to change my life. His response was simple, I can give you that, but it will cost you more than you can imagine. He had dismissed her words. He was a man of action, not words. He's taken the vow she offered and had drawn it without thinking. Trouble. The warning had come from his uncle late one evening as they shared palm wine under the stars. You think you can bargain with Ifeoma and win? But it seems it's before. The magic is powerful and you lose more than you pride. But Obinna didn't believe in magic. He had seen the world for what it was, a place where you had to fight to get what you want. So, when the wealth started pouring in, when the crops on the farm began to grow better than he ever seen, Obinna thought nothing more of it. Ifeoma had given him the tools to succeed, and he was finally rising above his circumstances. He murmured within himself, this my uncle is like he's what will I call it? Jealous of me. But things were changing. Every day his dreams grew more intense, more real, and the fear that had started as a whisper in the back of his mind began to echo in his chest. Every night he could feel someone watching him. He couldn't shake. The change was slow at first. Adanna's warmth faded. She no longer laughed at his jokes or looked at him the same way. She was distant. In fact, their child became very sick at the point of death, consumed by something Obinna couldn't understand. The first time she left him standing in the middle of their home, her eyes locked on the empty space in front of her. Obinna realized he had lost her. But then, it was the money, the land that had always been poor, that he had never yielded anything to feed them both, now seemed to produce the best crops in the village. His business dealings flourished and he became the talk of the town. Even the town elders began asking for his advice. Obinna thought his life was changing for the better. He could finally afford to send his children to school, but they were dying gradually. To buy the things he had always wanted, the hunger for success burned brightly within him. But as the weeks passed, something in him began to grow uneasy again. He felt disconnected from the life he was building. The more he had, the less he felt. It was Adana's absence that haunted him the most. Every night she would sit by the window staring out at the night sky, her face a mask of emptiness. And when he tried to speak to her, her responses were mechanical, as someone else was controlling her. One night, as Obinna lay in bed, unable to sleep, he heard a sound, a soft rustling in the hallway. It was quiet, but it was enough to make him sit up, his heart racing. He got out of bed and quietly walked towards the sound. What he saw made his blood run cold. Adana stood at the doorway of their home, speaking in a language that wasn't hers. Her voice was soft, hypnotic, almost like a chant, and standing before her, watching her with an unreadable expression, was Ifeoma. Obinna's breath caught in his throat as he realized the truth. Adana was no longer his wife. She had been taken by Ifeoma, claimed by her dark magic. The woman he loved so dearly had become a vessel, an empty shell for whatever twisted power Ifeoma had instilled in her. Ifeoma, he cried, stepping forward. What have you done to her? Ifeoma didn't look at her. Her eyes were locked on Adana, her lips curling into a smile. She is mine now. That is mine. Obinna, just as you are, just as everyone who drank from my cup is. Obinna's legs trembled. No, I didn't. This wasn't what I wanted. I just wanted a chance to give us a better life. Everything comes with a price. Everything comes with a price, Ifeoma said. Her voice was cold. Without mercy, she stepped closer, her gaze piercing. The wealth, the success, the love is all mine now, and you will never escape me. Suddenly, Obinna understood it wasn't just his life that he had sold. It was everyone's life. His wife, his children, his very soul had been taken in exchange for a life that was never truly his. In his panic, Obinna tried to run. He turned to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The walls of the house seemed to close in on him, and the air grew heavier, thicker, as if the very land he had walked on for years was rejecting him. He spun around, eyes wide, and that's when he saw it, the reflection of himself in the mirror. But it wasn't just his face staring back at him. There was something behind him, something dark, something monstrous pulling at him. He turned again, his heart racing, but when he reached the door, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. A small piece of paper on the floor. It was the letter from Ifeoma, the one she had left with the vow all those days ago. He bent down and picked it up, reading the words written in her delicate script. The darkness closed in. Obinna knew that he had made a deal that he couldn't take back. But as the world around him grew colder, as Ifeoma's power tightened its grip on him, he realized that there was no escape. Ifeoma had watched every man in the village fall under her spell. No one was beyond her reach. Not a single soul, from the oldest to the youngest, was immune to her dark desires. But there was one man who defied her, and this would be the one time Ifeoma's power would meet its limits. It was the moment Udochi stepped into her life. Udochi was everything Ifeoma despised. Young, beautiful, full of life. Her beauty was unmatched, and she knew it. Her father was wealthy, and she had every possession she could ever want. But there was one thing she didn't have yet: the heart of the man she wanted. Udochi had set her sights on Chinonso, a young man who had just returned from the United States. He was everything she dreamt of: handsome, successful, and from a respectable family. But he was not like the others. He saw through Ifeoma's charm. He wasn't swayed by her offers of power or wealth. When Udochi caught wind of this, she knew exactly what to do. She wanted Chinonso, and nothing, I mean nothing, no one would stop her from claiming him. The village buzzed with excitement. Udochi had succeeded in winning Chinonso's heart. Their love was the talk of the town. A beautiful story of a young girl from the village and a man who had returned from the city. But Ifeoma was not pleased. She had never failed before, and the thought of being rejected by a young girl who had just arrived into the world of riches enraged her. Udochi's beauty and charm were enough to make Chinonso fall in love with her. But there was more than just love between them. Udochi's father, wealthy and influential, arranged for the most extravagant wedding the city had ever seen. The ceremony was a spectacle, something straight out of a fairy tale. But Ifeoma's heart burned with jealousy. Udochi had everything, everything she wanted, but could never have. And Ifeoma would stop at nothing to claim what was hers. Every night, she visited the dreams of Chinonso, trying to twist his mind, trying to make him doubt Udochi's love. But each time he awoke, knowing the truth, he wanted Udochi, and so no spell could change that. But what Ifeoma didn't expect was Udochi's prayers. Unlike any other woman in the village, Udochi was not content with the blessing she had received. She had built a small altar in the corner of her room where she would go to pray every night. She was a woman of faith, always seeking guidance. But the one thing Ifeoma could not see was that Udochi had an unshakable connection to a power greater than any magic Ifeoma could wave. It wasn't prayers to the village gods or any of the spirit that Ifeoma controlled. No, no, no. Udochi prayed to a higher power, a silent force that shaded her from Ifeoma's influence, though she never knew the full influence, though she never knew the full extent of its protection. Udochi had no idea that Ifeoma had noticed. She had seen her prayers and felt the power radiating from Udochi's room. Ifeoma's hatred grew higher, stronger. For the first time in her life, she had met someone who was immune to her witchcraft, someone who didn't need her power, someone whose faith was stronger than any spell she could cast. In fact, someone who did not want her own wealth. I mean Ifeoma's wealth. Ifeoma tried everything she could to break Udochi's spirit. She whispered in Chinonso's ear, filled his dreams with doubt, and even went so far as to appear in the form of other women, seducing him in his sleep. But no matter what Ifeoma did, Chinonso always returned to Udochi. He loved her, and he could not be swayed. Seeing her plans unravel, Ifeoma realized something that made her blood run cold. Udochi's purity, her belief, and her unwavering love for Chinonso were stronger than any dark power Ifeoma could muster. Her jealousy fastened, and the more she watched Udochi and Chinonso's happiness, the more her obsession grew. But she wasn't finished. There was still one card she had to play: the wedding. If she couldn't have Chinonso's heart, she could destroy the marriage before it even began. And so she had planned in motion. The day of the wedding arrived. Everything was perfect. The village was like bustling with excitement. The church was filled with guests, the air heavy with the smell of incense and the rich sounds of music played by the best orchestra in the city. But there was a hidden darkness in the air, something no one could sense. The pastor who had agreed to marry Udochi and Chinonso had long been under Ifeoma's control. He had come to her seeking wealth, seeking a way to expand his influence, and she had granted his wish. But in return, she had bound him to her, a slave to her power, unable to escape. As the pastors prepared to pronounce Udochi and Chinonso as husband and wife, Udochi noticed something strange. There was something in the air, something not quite right. The pastor's face was pale, his eyes glazed over, and there was a strange, unsettling smile on his lips. His words came out distorted, as though they were not his own. And then something happened. Udochi's heart skipped a beat as she stared at the altar. The pastor's face shifted, his feature warping in front of her eyes. The man standing before her was no longer the pastor who had known her family, no longer the man who had blessed her engagement. It was the former, her eyes glowing with a malevolent gleam, her face twisted into a sneer. Udochi stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. "No," she whispered, "this is not happening." "You? Honey, what is the problem?" Chinonso asked. But before she could say another word, the voice from the pastor's body spoke, and it wasn't his voice. It was the former's voice, smooth and cold. "You should have joined me, Udochi," the former said, and the former hissed. "Now you will be mine." "Ah, you are joking," Udochi said. Udochi felt a cold rush of terror. The world around her seemed to spin as if former dark magic took hold of the pastor's body, using it as a vessel to seal her cause. In a moment of pure desperation, Udochi remembered her prayers. She had never been one to give up easily. She had always known that something greater than Ifeoma existed. She quickly turned her focus inward, locking her eyes on the altar she had built in her room. Her prayers had shielded her before, and she believed they would shield her now. But it wasn't just a prayer. It was the belief that no dark force could overpower the truth in her heart. She reached deep inside herself, calling on the strength she had learned from her faith and her upbringing. She could feel the power, the pure force of good building inside her. She stood tall, facing Ifeoma, and with a steady voice, she shouted, "In the name of Jesus, everything pure, I reject your darkness. I will not be bound." At that moment, the room trembled. Ifeoma's twisted form fitted. For the first time, Udochi saw the fear in her eyes. But she didn't give up. She would fight, and so would Udochi. The pastor's body convulsed, and a low groan filled the air. The magic was fighting against Udochi's resistance. But she was not alone. Something was changing in the room, something that Udochi couldn't understand. The moment Ifeoma's magic began to lose its grip on the pastor's body, Udochi had a voice, a familiar one, calling her name. It was Chinonso, standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with shock and horror. "Udochi!" he cried. "We can't let her win. Don't." Udochi felt the strength in her legs return. She reached out, grabbing Chinonso's hand. Together, they faced Ifeoma, knowing that the witch's finalist power had been unleashed. Now, they fight for their love and their future. What do you think? Please go and subscribe. Subscribe fast, fast, fast. So while we're bringing sweeter, interesting. The village of Okorodo was never the same again. Ifeoma, the witch who had haunted the village for years, was gone. Her grips on the people, her manipulative power had crumbled in the face of Udochi's unwavering belief. The battle had been fierce, magic versus fate, darkness against light. But in the end, it was Udochi who stood victorious. When Ifeoma's form had finally disappeared into the air, her power dissipating like smoke, the village is heavy, The village's heavy, oppressive silence lifted. The air was clearer, the sun brighter, and for the first time in years, the people felt a sense of peace. But Udochi and Chinonso were not free of the scars Ifeoma had left behind. They had seen the darkest part of the human soul and the consequences of greed. Chinonso, now fully aware of the evil that had almost destroyed them, took Udochi's hand and whispered, "We almost lost everything, but we won together." Udochi nodded, her heart heavy with the memories. "We fought the wrong battles, Chinonso. We were blinded by what we thought we needed, but now we know the true cost of what we choose." It was a lesson they had carried for the rest of their lives. The village slowly healed, their faith renewed. But the lesson of Ifeoma's reign lived on, echoing in the heart of those who had survived her. The villagers no longer sought wealth above all else. They no longer believed that success came from manipulations or shortcuts. They understood now that the truest riches were the ones that couldn't be taken by dark forces: love, faith, and the courage to choose what was wrong, what was right. The lesson behind this story is the cost of ambition is often more than one can bear. When you allow darkness to guide your path, you will lose yourself. True wealth is not in what you possess, but in what you preserve: your heart, your soul, and your integrity. And when the light is clouded by greed, only faith and love can bring you back into the truth. So please subscribe while you watch our next video. See you in the next one. Bye for now. Bye.